third movie in the Julie James Chronicles of I Know You Did Last Summer 2025. I Know You Did Last Summer 25 tells the story of 5 teens who are part of a car accident who receive their threats for involvement a year later. Now, as much as marketed was a really remake, it really is more like a sequel to the first 2 movies. And depending on how you feel about the first 2 movies, or if you're a big fan of this franchise or not, it's really going to depend on how you feel about this movie. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of this franchise. And even with my low expectations, I still thought it was pretty bad. And I feel like people, though, who did really enjoy this movie or really did enjoy the franchise will have at least a decent time with this, better time than I did. But with that being said, let's talk about Julie James Chronicles Part 3. And that is what I'm calling this franchise from now on this channel. If they continue going the way they do. And the first pro I really want to give it is I actually like that this movie feels like the most violent of the 3. Maybe the kills don't do it, maybe they are, but watching this just feels like it's the most violent fisherman of the entire franchise, so I can respect that. I like that part of the movie. And I also like that this movie attempts to change or do something different with this franchise. Watching the first 3 felt like watching really the same movie with different people, so I actually liked they did something different. They fell in their face, but I respect they tried. And lastly, this is gonna sound so weird, but there was a moment after the reveal of the fisherman where they played a song involving vampires. Don't know the song, but it was like a chef's kiss moment, because I'm like, I watched it, I heard that, I'm like, that is the most perfect timing for that. I'm not even gonna lie. And I haven't heard a lot of movies with that, so I do want to point that out. That was a big positive for me in this one. But unfortunately, that is it for my positives, because I have a good amount of mix. And the first mix I want to give it is the characters. And I will say it's not more or less on the acting, because I think the acting was pretty good. It mainly is the fact of the writing was involved. It's not really good. And it feels like these characters are carbon copies of the characters from the original. And it's even pointed out in the movie with the references between the blonde girl. I cannot say her name right now, or I can't remember her name right now, but her character to Helen, even the movie, it's pointed out so many times. Yeah, that's there. And I'm like, okay, you can do that. So you can only do that to a degree. And I feel like part of what they do with her character is just so much to do with how badly they messed up with Helen's character in the first one. So I think they're trying to make up for it to a degree. So that's that. And lastly, I do want to say there's a good amount of moments where something feels missed in this movie. Like, something will happen where there's one moment, especially, where where characters like they won against the fisherman, and the next scene dying in front of their father. And that's me, I'm like, oh, that something feels missed. And there's quite a few moments like that in this movie. And I also feel very mixed on what they do with Ray's character in this movie. And I just say that because I feel like this is going to be negative for a lot of people. But I personally feel like not a lot of franchises would do that with a legacy character. And I'm not a big fan of legacy characters, right? Even Ray's character, I'm like, he's fine. So ultimately, I thought that was an interesting choice for this certain franchise that I didn't entirely hate. They went about it really badly. I'm like, okay, that's okay. But yeah, what they do with that legacy character, I feel very mixed on. Like, borderline negative, but still very mixed same time, because a lot of franchises will do that. I do want to acknowledge that. And another mix for me is going to be Julie herself. I have put Julie in the mixed every single time she was in the movies, like the first 2, because my main complaint was that she was a character who could not survive without others the entire time. And I will say that that is not the case for this movie for Julie. But overall, I think Julie's involvement in this movie is also mixed. She's still in the mix. And that's really it for my mix, because unfortunately, most of it, some of it's also in the negative. And the first negative I want to give it is the writing. There's a lot of bad writing in this one, especially with certain things said in the movie. Now, there was some times where I did laugh, especially one in the end credit, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there was some moments I laughed, but for the most part, I was like, okay, it's kind of cringe, but that's the writing was not there. And it also had those moments in this movie where they just spoon feed you. In the beginning with like introduction to Stevie, where it's like, oh Stevie, this happened with Stevie's father. We just connected, and they say that like 3-4 times the same scene. I'm like, that's interesting. And they do that a few times. Where they just like say things out loud like that, like spoon feed you, and I'm like, okay, you don't need to do that. That has a lot to do with the writing, but though. And secondly, I was not a fan of the end credits scene. Does it have to do with how I feel about Brandy's character? No, actually, not at all. My issue with the end credit scene is they end with a sequel ending, and I don't like that. I don't like how they ended. They ended it like that with the first two, and I did not like that. And they ended the same way this one. I'm like, I don't like how you keep ending this movie the same way. Stop doing that. And it just feels like it's trying so hard for a sequel. But with that really being the negatives, which is a big bulk of the movie, I also wanted to add there's a lot of fan service in this movie, and I didn't really care for the fan service in particular. But one thing I will say, the only real fan service I honestly liked was the scene we got with Helen's character and her confrontation with a character that was a lot like her. That's the only real fan service someone actually liked. Itself, that's really it. And I want to talk about some spoilers. And the first spoiler I want to talk about is the Stevie reveal. Now, when I was watching online press, there was a video where Julie James' character said something about a secret, or some trailer somewhere said about a secret between them. And as soon as I saw Stevie's character on screen and they had that, oh, she was that, I'm like, it's gonna be Stevie. And it's gonna be because she was connected to the guy who died. And when they mentioned the drug problem, I'm like, probably that. And I was right. I was 100% right. And look, I would have sat back and enjoyed a movie, and I can enjoy a movie like that. But the way they chose Dre's involvement with him, like being the one who helped her with her revenge, I'm like, what? Okay. Double, like a Ghostface situation. And to me, that is just not there. It's just not there. And I don't know. It was just, I saw that and my jaw was like, oh my god, that's not how you go about it. Respect, you try to do something different, but no, that was not enjoyable to watch. That was not a good ending to go. And the ending with them having like, oh, I forget exactly what it said, but like, I'll always know, or something along the lines of, they'll never forget that they'll always know. It's just like, it's almost, oh no, it's not over. That's what I think that's what it said. And I'm like, oh my god. Again. Okay. Yeah, I also do want to say, I feel like the Fisherman's look, even throughout this franchise, I feel like they utilize it the best in this movie. I really feel that way. And I actually can respect that movie does that. But overall, the big two things is going to be the drawbreakers is going to be the reveal with Ray and Stevie, even though Stevie, that could have been interesting if they just left it like that with having Ray involvement. But yeah, that's kind of it for a little discussion, because that's the main discussion of this movie people are going to talk about, is that one leaving in theaters. So overall, I was left pretty disappointed by this movie, and depending on how you feel about the first two is really going to shift how you feel about this one. But if you've seen I Know You Did Last Summer, comment down below what you think about it, or what you think this next movie, if there is another one, will look like. And I'll see you guys soon with a ranking of this franchise.